Hello, everyone. Here we are on a plane, and you just arrived in another country. But do you know what country you've arrived in? Maybe you're not sure. Well, you actually arrived in the country of Colombia. And now, Colombia is what we're going to learn about today. And we're going to give you a little bit of a global education through this video. I hope you really enjoy it. My name is Scott DeCourt, and I work for Word and Deed. So, what do you know about Colombia? Some of us maybe think of soccer, maybe we think of their yellow jerseys, maybe we think of cities and packed people, concrete, maybe we think of violence on the news, or you've heard of drugs in Colombia. Maybe that's what we associate with Colombia. Well, some of those things are true, but that's not the complete picture. The complete picture looks like this. It's beautiful cities and beautiful landscapes. It's located in the northern tip of South America. That's where Colombia is. And in the background here, you're seeing Bogota, the capital city. It's a really beautiful country, but the people are also very beautiful too. They're a fine mix of European and indigenous people, and what they're called is mestizo people. And they have beautiful dances, and they're often smiling. They also produce, speaking of blends, the best coffee in the world. And they're well known for it too. Colombia is also well known for their national soccer team. And the national soccer team is these bright yellow jerseys. Maybe you've heard of people like Falcao and James Rodriguez. These are people very famous to Colombia. Now, how did Colombia get its name? Well, let's think for a second. Who's that man there? Well, that's right, Christopher Columbus. And he first discovered the Americas, right? And he also was given the privilege of having this country named after him. Colombia, Christopher Columbus, you get the idea. Now, quick history here. It was discovered in 1500, and then for the next 300 years, the Spanish started to settle down here and to mix and marry with the indigenous people living there. Over 300 years, the Roman Catholic Church also was incorporated into these settlements, and the population started to grow, as well as the church did too. So, in 1819, who led an uprising, and the uprising overthrew the Spanish crown. And he led the uprising in what are now the countries of Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. Okay? So he's a very interesting man. Maybe you want to learn more about him. In 1851, slavery was also abolished from Colombia, and then it was called the Republic of Colombia after that. Religion in Colombia is primarily Catholic, and 73% of the country, they claim to be Catholic, 14% claim to be Protestant. And that comes from the roots of who the Spanish were, and they brought in this religion, and this religion really established society. They made hospitals, they made schools, they made jails even. And the church and the state at that time of settlement, those first 300 to 400 years, were really close. And that means the governors, the people who were governing the area, the state, were also very close in ties with priests and bishops at the time. So religion in Colombia is, on the outward, lots of Christianity, but to practicing people is not so much. So there is definitely a need there for the gospel, the true gospel. In recent history, you may have heard about drug trafficking, and from the 1970s to the 90s, there was lots of drug trafficking to the United States. And this is because Mexico shut down its borders to illegally giving marijuana to the states, and then the Colombians saw an opportunity to grow marijuana, but also cocaine, and to send it to the United States. And a man who saw that opportunity was Pablo Escobar, and perhaps you've heard about Pablo Escobar as well. So he said, yes, let's do this. So he made a lot of money, him and another group called the Cali Cartel, but they also caused a lot of violence and a lot of deaths, and the government couldn't stop them, no one could stop them. And so they forced a lot of people from their farms into the cities. In other recent history, there was problems around the political environment of the time. And at this time, communism was seeping its way through South America and into Colombia as well. And the FARC were a rebel group that believed communist ideas, and they were in opposition to the democratic government at the time. They caused a lot of violence and strife too, a lot of terrorism, which forced the people, again, some into Venezuela and some into the cities of Bogota and the coast for safety. So there's a lot of violence going on the last 20, 30 years, and the political violence, especially in the 80s. So what we're seeing now is there's 80% of people living in the main cities of Colombia, where 20% are living in the country, the rural environment, as opposed to the urban. All these people are moving into the cities, and now the situation looks like this. There's a lot of weak families, and this happens because of divorce or fathers not supporting their families, or there's a lot of abuse in the homes too, violence, sexual abuse as well. And what happens is a lot of teens join these gangs, and gangs have a lot of power because they use extortion, which is they tell a store, if you want safety, if you want to operate, we'll protect you, right? So they get a lot of money and they recruit youth this way. Another problem in these communities where there's internally displaced people is that there's poor education. So these children grow up not knowing any different, right? Also, there's a high unemployment, meaning people are living day to day, from hand to mouth, just trying to become, some are self-employed, just trying to make a day's wage as well. So that's the situation coming out of all this recent violence and strife. And Conviventia is now working to change the story. And they're a local partner that we, at Word Indeed, we work with. They're changing the story in a few different ways. Now, they're teaching parents nutrition and health, a new way to think about food. They also have 4 schools in urban areas, in cities. And so they're training kids from K through 12, Christian principles and proper principles to give them a foundation for the future ahead. What they're also doing is training parents the skills needed to have good, solid jobs that can support their families. So this is the story of change that we're seeing. And this happens only through the golden thread of the gospel. You'll see a golden thread throughout these pictures. And the gospel needs to be present in these teachings, or else we're just trying to change society without giving real lasting change to the real human problems, which is sin. And sin is a problem that is underlying in the other problems, the symptoms that we see. And so we need to get at the root of the problem to solve it for a long time. And the verse that Conviventia has chosen this year is, "Then I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever, for the good of them and their children after them." So they're really trying to ingrain the gospel and teach these children as they grow up in their schools how to live for the Lord. And then those children can teach their children, and you see the effect afterwards. So they're doing this in a few ways. They do Christian education, they teach them proper health care, they support the whole family, and they also provide skills training for parents to have good jobs, to supply for their children as well. So you see, these are the different ways that Conviventia is helping out. And now I'd like you to listen to a message from the president of this organization, Missy Christie, and hear what she has to say about the school in those communities.
You can actually see this construction all the way from the main avenue down there. And this mountain has been recognized for violence, for death, for poverty, for criminality, for such bad things. I want this to be a shining light and a testimony and a witness of what God can do in these desolate areas when the children, sons and daughters of God, take action and reach out to people with love and service.
Nosotros vemos a Dios a diario. Cuando hay un estudiante con una dificultad muy grande, nos arrodillamos y oramos.
Gracias a todos los que han apoyado este colegio, porque gracias a ustedes es que este colegio va creciendo y creciendo y creciendo y los niños van siendo más inteligentes y creyendo en la palabra de Dios.
So Colombia, in summary, is a beautiful country with beautiful people. But they've also been torn by the effects of sin, by conflicts, and by violence recently. And they're in need of gospel restoration, for sure. We all are. And this is where Conviventia and Word Indeed is able to come alongside these children and these communities and help them out. So I wonder what you've learned from this little talk we've had here. And what's something you learned that you didn't know about Colombia before? And if you want to research something further, please let me know and find out more, maybe about Pablo Escobar or about the FARC. Who are they? Or maybe you want to learn more about internally displaced peoples. These are all different topics you can explore. And here's a few more resources for you, information about Colombia, some stats, and you can look up these resources too. Thank you so much for joining along with me and learning more about Colombia.